I am going to leave my shoes on. I'm pretty sure they are killing my feet, but I cannot feel them, so it's perfect. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to share some of my story with you and talk about change, unexpected change, something I have developed a close and personal relationship with over the last few years since this big unexpected thing happened to me. My journey with paralysis has been nothing like I ever would have imagined. It's been a lot of loss and heartbreak, lessons and surprises. But when I look at my life today, the things that really matter, it's not all that different from what I would have expected, and that took a lot of work. And so in sharing my story, I want to talk about how I took that change and the loss and the grief and moved forward with my life, how I integrated it into my life, how I created a life that still makes me happy, that still feels authentic and real and true to who I am, because we're all susceptible to change. We will all experience grief and loss. We cross our fingers, maybe we pray, we hope for the best, because the tough stuff is really hard. Sorry. It's really hard, but it can happen to anyone, and it happened to me. When people meet me, their question, whether or not they dare to ask it, is why am I in a wheelchair? Just over 3 years ago, this was my family. A few months before my accident, we were in Disneyland. I was 28 years old. My husband and I were a few months shy of our 10-year wedding anniversary. For those of you doing fast math, we were 19 when we got married. We had our 3 kids. Our boys were 6 and 4 years old. Our daughter was just 18 months. We were at a place in our life where we were feeling settled. After years of getting through school and working, having our children, dealing with postpartum depression and anxiety, and a whole slew of things that life kind of threw our way, we were feeling settled. We had recently moved in to what we hoped would be our forever home, and we're in the midst of a renovation and an addition. One afternoon, in March of 2016, we decided to go see the progress on the addition. We literally left dinner on the stove. We were supposed to be gone a minute or two. We walked up onto the addition, and a hole had been left open where the main floor would go to the basement. It was about 10 feet deep, and I fell through it. Now, I had had 3 C-sections, and maybe those of you that have had C-sections can relate, but there was a very distinct feeling in my legs each time the spinal took effect. And that feeling came flooding back to me when I hit the ground. And I realized almost instantly that I wasn't going to be standing up and walking away from this. What I suspected, and was later confirmed, was that I was paralyzed. It was sudden, life-altering, unexpected change. I could hear my boys screaming. I could hear my husband trying to get them into the house while calling 911. And my thoughts went to them, and that they still needed me. And what I repeated to myself over and over as I laid there was, it's just your legs. It's just your legs. You can still be a mom. It's just your legs. Sorry. And months later, my sister-in-law sent me something, and it said, it's one thing to say you would die for your children, and it's another thing to live for them. And that resonated so deeply with me because I was still in the midst of living for them. I made a choice at the bottom of that stupid hole that I would live for my kids, that I would accept whatever this was going to become and do my best to move on with it because my kids needed me. And for months, probably more than a year, my recovery had nothing to do with me and everything to do with my kids and my husband. It was about making sure that I could still serve a purpose to them, that I was still valuable to them, that I wouldn't become obsolete in the lives of these people that I loved more than anything. And when recovery got hard, which it often did, when I didn't want to keep going, when I didn't want to try again, when I couldn't see the purpose of living if it meant living with a spinal cord injury, they were my purpose. They were the reason I kept going. They were the reason I tried again. They were my motivation. Even here, this was 10 days after my accident outside VGH, they were why I was pushing forward. They were why I was smiling. My husband knew my motivation and would use it against me, probably in the least selfish way you can use something against somebody. I remember one morning, we were living back at home at this point, so it was a few months later, and I didn't want to get out of bed. I was exhausted, I was done with being paralyzed. And he sat next to me, and all he said was, "There's 3 kids in the kitchen asking when you're coming out." And that's all he said, and that's all I needed. I got up, and I started my day, because I was living for my kids, and thank God they still wanted me. And if they wanted me, then that was where I was going to be. I think, as everyone in here probably knows, these kids grow and change way too fast. And part of my thinking was, the longer it took me to get my shit together, the more moments and the more time and the more experiences I was going to miss with them. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. I wasn't willing to give more to this injury than it had already taken from me. Which is why 5 months after my accident, we were in Tofino. I wasn't willing to give it a summer vacation with my kids at the ages they were at. And a few months later, when my in-laws offered to take us back to Disneyland, we went. Both trips were hard and exhausting and awesome and huge learning experiences. But we did them, and so much else, because I wasn't willing to give more to this injury than it had already taken, and it took so much. As much as telling myself that it was just my legs brought me comfort as I was laying in that hole, I quickly learned that spinal cord injury is so much more. I have a T11 spinal cord injury. T11 is just the area of the spinal cord that was damaged. So for me, just below my belly button down, I have no feeling or function, no movement. I really like this image here to help explain it a little bit. It shows the tip of the iceberg. What you can see, my inability to walk, is the tip of the iceberg, but there is so much under the surface. For me, as I'm sure you can imagine, the loss of bladder and bowel control has been the hardest thing to figure out and accept. Something my husband said to me very early on was that there would be things we needed to deal with and needed to get through to get on with our day and to get on with our life. And those words have stuck with me, especially when dealing with the bladder and bowel stuff. There's changes in sexual function, and I definitely miss the way sex used to be. But I'm lucky to have a partner who will get experimental with me, and we can make it so it's still satisfying and fun. There's pain. There's chronic daily pain. There's muscle spasms and increased susceptibility to infection and pressure sores and many other things. But then there is the psychological and emotional aspect. Not only coming to terms with, oh no, don't change it yet, sorry, I didn't mean to look at you.
Don't look at me.
Not only coming to terms with all of this, and accepting it as part of my life and learning to manage it, but figuring out who I was without these physical abilities that I'd always had and thought I would always have. It was realizing how much of my identity and my life was wrapped up in these physical abilities. It felt like everything, from driving to getting dressed, to playing with my kids and crawling into their beds for stories and snuggles, to getting outside and traveling, to little things like just wanting to show my daughter how to do a plie or a push turn. And that's just scratching the surface, but it felt like everything required the use of my legs. But I came to realize that that was only because I'd only ever looked at life from one perspective, from an able-bodied walking perspective, which I now know is a privilege. And that wasn't me anymore. And if I wanted to move on with my life, if I wanted to enjoy my life, I was going to have to embrace a new perspective and change the way I did things. I was going to have to adapt. And adapting is not easy. Recovery is not easy. It's far from it. It's grueling. It's physically and emotionally exhausting. And every situation that requires adapting also required grieving the way that it used to be. It was this constant battle between making progress and leaving space to grieve when it came up. It was this weird celebratory sadness, a celebration for what I'd accomplished, and then a sadness for all of the reasons, all of the loss that it brought up, and the reasons I was having to do it in the first place. It was hard. It's worth it, but it's hard. And I think the key to successfully adapt to any big life change is to see the purpose in doing things differently. And as I said before, my family was that purpose for me. They fueled my desire to figure this out and were my sole motivation for so long. But because of their support, because of the grace they showed me during my recovery, because my husband's willingness to move heaven and earth to help me see my goals, from the biggest of things to helping me get these pants on, because I really wanted to wear them tonight, and I cannot get them up by myself. Because they never made me feel like a burden. And they always made sure I knew I was valued. Because they made this journey about all of us, and it wasn't just about me. Because of all that and more, my recovery and my motivation became about me as well, and about getting my life back, and about learning to value myself. And I don't think we realize how much better we are for ourselves, for the people we love, when we value ourselves. When it comes to spinal cord injury, I am actually still pretty new at this, but at 3 years in, oh, you could have turned the picture, sorry. But at 3 years in, I do feel like I have so much of my life back. I drive, and I do dress myself, usually. I play with my kids, and I crawl in their beds. I get outside, and I travel. And I still cannot demonstrate the plie or the push turn, but my husband has mastered the technique to show her. But most importantly, I've discovered time and time again that who I am as a person, as a wife, as a mother, as a friend, as everything, is so much more than my legs could ever give me. That being said, I still think about my able-bodied life every day. I still have a good crying session every few weeks. I still get frustrated with paralysis and all of the things that it entails, and I get angry and I miss some of the things that I can't do and things that are different. But I've chosen to move forward, and I'm so glad that I did that every day, because it's been so worth it to get my life back. Life is harder with paralysis. There's no questioning that. And because of that, I could easily wrap up my time with you and tell you to enjoy every moment, because you never know when something could change. I'm sure you would accept that, and you maybe would vow to go for a run tomorrow, because you can, and I can't. And if you're gonna go down that rabbit hole, though, I would suggest skipping the run and just having sex. But you do you, it's all good. But that's not what I want to leave you with, because I know that life can get hard, and I know that motherhood can be hard, and that every moment isn't enjoyable. It's just the way it is. So what I want to leave you with is this. You don't know when your life could change. And so in between the scheduling and the chaos and the realities of life, be sure to take time for the good stuff. Because when life surprises you with something tough, It is the things you enjoy and the people you love and everything that makes you happy that will get you through. And if I could offer just one other small piece of advice, just a housekeeping detail, it would be to avoid falling in a hole. Thank you.